So hopefully you watched the previous one in which we went over the cerebrum and the diencephalon. Today we're going to knock out the brainstem, the cerebellum, and some of the cranial nerves. So check it out. Right here we got that brainstem right there. We got the spinal cord down below. We got the diencephalon up above. Brainstem has three major regions. Okay, there is the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla oblongata. Midbrain is the uppermost one. Here's the midbrain right here. Then below that, we got our pons. Pons is right here. Look at the bulge of the pons. You can always recognize the bulge of the pons. Then down here, we got the medulla oblongata. So we're going to do all three of these in order. So buckle up. Let's go. All right, here we got the midbrain. There it is. It's going to play roles in vision, hearing, motor control, and a lot more. It is just below the diencephalon. And like we said earlier, this is the pons right below it. Got some neighboring things to the midbrain. We said we got the diencephalon. Right in front, we got the mammillary body. Right behind, we got the tail end of the corpus callosum, and as well as the top of the cerebellum as well. Okay, running through the midbrain is a passageway called the Cerebral Aqueduct. Right up here, the space that my cursor is dancing in is the third ventricle. If you're in the third ventricle, you're CSF, and CSF is going to flow down the Cerebral Aqueduct, down, to the fourth ventricle, which is right here. This is the fourth ventricle right here. So the Cerebral Aqueduct connects the third and the fourth ventricle. Now, if we go posterior to the Cerebral Aqueduct, we are going to see a region called the tectum. The word tectum means roof. It's more of a roof in quadrupeds, less of a roof, more like a back wall in bipeds. So this is the tectum. It is going to have four bulging structures. We can only see two, here and here, because this is a mid-sagittal section, so we're looking at half. The collection of the four bulging structures are known as the corpora quadrigemina. Corpora, bodies, quad, four, gemina, twins, the four twin bodies. Now, of these bodies, the top two, and we see one of them here, the top two are the superior colliculi. The bottom two, and again, I'm on just one here, are the inferior colliculi. So let's talk about these guys. Let's do that. All right, here is a superior colliculus. It is this uppermost bump on the posterior midbrain. It's part of the tectum. It's part of the corpora quadrigemina. It is involved in visual reflexes. Best thing to imagine is someone is throwing you a ball and they're lobbing it up, and you're kind of moving your head and your hands and you're following that ball to catch it. You're using your superior colliculi to do that. All right, it's going to coordinate the movement of your eyes and your head, and your eyes and your hands. Down below, we got the inferior colliculus. If someone jumped out from behind you right now and said, "Boo," you'd probably turn towards them in a frightened state. Maybe you'd punch them. And what you would be exhibiting is the startle reflex, and that is the domain of your inferior colliculi. So we got an inferior colliculus right here. It is involved in your startle reflex. Okay. In the front of the midbrain, we're going to see one of the cranial nerves we have to deal with. This nerve, this guy right here, that's one of the cranial nerves. There are 12 pairs of cranial nerves. This is one of the oculomotor nerves. A lot of your eye movements, oculomotor eye movements, a lot of your eye movements, most of your eye movements, in fact, are going to be in response to the oculomotor nerve. It is also known as the third cranial nerve number 3. It does a lot of eye movements. It's also involved in dilation and constriction of your pupil. Okay, Now, let's look above the superior colliculus in the back. This little guy right here with a 23 on him is the pineal gland. Makes a hormone called melatonin, which is very much involved in sleep and wake cycles. So look, you got that choroid plexus, you got that corpus callosum, then right there you got that pineal gland. So pineal gland, superior colliculus, inferior colliculus, right in a row. And now we got the pons. The word pons means bridge. So there's a lot of white matter in it going up and down, a lot of white matter going transversely to get into the cerebellum as well. The pons has clusters of somata, in other words, it has nuclei involved in myriad things, chewing, swallowing, breathing, peeing, and a whole lot more. Check out the bulge of the pons, by the way. You can always find the pons because of the bulge. And if you go right above that bulge, you get the oculomotor nerve that we just talked about. All right, here's the medulla. The bottomest part of the brainstem, the medulla oblongata. It's going to have motor tracts in the front, sensory tracts in the back. It's going to have a lot of nuclei as well, involved in things like maintaining your heart rate, your blood pressure, breathing, throwing up, a good sneeze, all depend on your medulla. Okay, cool. Guys, we're done the brainstem. Let's do the cerebellum. Here we have one of the two cerebellar hemispheres. Cerebellum does a bunch of stuff. Usually the simplest thing, if you want to come up with one function of the cerebellum, it is involved in coordinating your body's movements. It has a lot of little folds called folia. They're kind of analogous to the gyri in the cerebrum, but not quite as prominent. Cerebellum basically is going to get the instructions that your cerebrum sends to your muscles. Then the cerebellum gets feedback from the muscles so it can compare what is supposed to happen with what is actually happening, and it can fix things. So that's the 10-second definition of the cerebellum, of its job at least. All right, the white matter of the cerebellum is known as the arbor vitae. There's a tree, and someone thought that the white matter looked like this tree. Anywho, there's the fourth ventricle right there. We see it between the cerebellum and the brainstem. Of course, it gets CSF from up here in the third ventricle. CSF goes down the cerebral aqueduct to get into the fourth ventricle. There are openings in the fourth ventricle. One in kind of the middle of it and two to the side. And that's what lets CSF get into the subarachnoid space. CSF can also go down into the central canal of the spinal cord as well. Here's a transverse fissure. Separates the occipital lobe of the cerebrum with the cerebellum. Transverse fissure right there. And if we put the two cerebellar hemispheres together, we can see this little piece in between them. Imagine there's no space here that's smushed together. This little chunk between them is called the vermis. It's one of the big parts of the cerebellum. The word vermis means worm. Somebody thought it looked like a worm. All right, guys, awesome. We're done the cerebellum. We're now going to do some cranial nerves. And there are 12 pairs of cranial nerves that are in your brain, coming out of your brain. It's probably the better way to say it. 12 pairs of cranial nerves. You are going to have to know the names and basic jobs of all 12, but we're not going to find all 12 on the model. We're only going to find like 3.5. So, I don't want an arrow there, do I? No, let's write. Let's draw. So there are 12 cranial nerves. See if I can fit 12. Can I fit 12 in a row here? I don't know. How many do I have so far? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That was 8, right? Yeah. That's not too bad. I don't know if I'll be able to fit all 12. Okay, sort of got it. So I wrote down the initials of them. The first pair of cranial nerves are known as the olfactory nerves. They're involved in smelling. They're sensory nerves. Second are the optic nerves. They're involved in vision. They're sensory as well. Then we have the ones we met earlier, the oculomotor nerves. They're motor nerves. They're involved in movements of the eye. And then we've got the trochlear nerves, also involved in eye movements. Then we've got the trigeminal nerves, which are involved in controlling movements of chewing muscles, plus also getting most of your sensory information from the face. So notice the first two were sensory, the next two were motor. The trigeminal is a mixed nerve because it has sensory and motor functions. Then we got the abducens nerve, which is a motor nerve involved in eye movement. And then we got the facial nerve, which is going to have sensory information, especially your sensation of taste from your tongue, for example, plus also movement of facial muscles. So like think facial expressions. Then we got your vestibulocochlear nerve, which comes from your inner ear structures. So it is important for balance and hearing. And then we got the glossopharyngeal nerve, which is going to be a mixed one as well. It's going to get information about taste, about blood pressure, about chemical levels, there we go, in your blood. It also controls muscle in your throat. Then we get your vagus nerve, which does a lot of sensory and motor jobs in your abdomen and your thorax. Then we got the accessory nerve, which is going to control muscles which allow you to shrug your shoulders and shake your head. And then we got the hypoglossal nerve, which is going to move your tongue. So we got all these different guys. There's a lot of mnemonic devices out there. If you Google cranial nerves mnemonic devices, you'll find a lot. Not all of them are rated G, so you are forewarned if you Google that. There's a bunch though. Old Opie occasionally tries trigonometry and feels vague, gloomy. Feels very gloomy, vague, and hypoactive. There you go. That's one. That's a good one. There's another one. Some say marry money, but my brother says big brains matter more. So this one tells me whether the nerves are sensory, motor, or both. Okay? So again, you got to know the names and basic jobs of all 12. You got to know them by their English name, like their written name, and also their number. So make sure you do both, okay? Okay, there's actually a chart to fill out in your lab manual, which I think is one of your homework assignments, to fill out that chart and to send it to me. All right. Like I said, we're not going to see all of them on, we're not going to learn all of them on the brain model. They're all there, but for some reason, you guys are lucky, we're not going to have to find them all. All right, we're going to find 3.5 of them. We don't see the olfactory nerves, but we see the things that they're going to. So I'm counting the olfactory as like a half. Olfactory nerves are going to come from your superior nose and hit right here. This is the olfactory bulbs. Receives the olfactory neurons from the nasal cavity. Olfactory neurons are weird too because there's just a whole bunch of them, whereas all the other nerves are paired. The olfactory nerves you don't have just like a pair of them. Got a whole bunch of them. All right, so olfactory bulb and bulb. There we go. And then, get out of here. Then we got the olfactory tract, which is taking the olfactory information towards the olfactory cortex in the medial temporal lobe, where it can be sorted, processed, interpreted, etc. So that's the olfactory bulb and tract. And then we see one of the optic nerves right here. Notice how the optic nerve has Roman numeral 2 on it because the optic nerve is the second cranial nerve. So there's an optic nerve right there. You get an optic nerve from each retina of the eye. And if we go a little bit behind the optic nerve, we get this area called the optic chiasm right here. And this is where some of the fibers from the optic nerve cross over. Vision is not totally a contralateral thing. the way it works is things in your right field of view go to your left occipital lobe. Things in your left field of view go to your right occipital lobe. So some of the fibers cross over at this optic chiasm. The word chiasm means X, by the way. All right, coming back from the optic chiasm, going towards the thalamus, we can see on each side an optic tract. This guy right here is an optic tract. There's the other one over there. Those are my two optic tracts, taking information towards the thalamus. All right. Now, if we go back a little bit farther, I can see this little guy with the Roman numeral 3 on it. That's the oculomotor nerve. We saw him earlier in a better view. So we're almost done, guys, with these cranial nerves. On the side of the pons, we have this big one right here and right here. That's the trigeminal nerve, cranial nerve number 5. Gets sensory information from the face and sends motor commands to your chewing muscles. And don't worry, we'll name those chewing muscles later on. So those are the cranial nerves you have to know in terms of picking them out on the model. That's not too bad. All right, I'm going to end this lab video right here with this beautiful brainstem and insula picture here. I want you to find all 11 of these things, okay? You got 11 things to find. Find all of them. Do it right now. That would be my recommendation. All right, guys, this was a short video. 16 minutes, not bad. Watch it twice. See you later. Bye.